we'd like to think we do a good job of that.
So how can we find out more about UK ECC and the advice that you give?
As always, we talk about our website. It's got lots of basic but good starting points of information on there across the whole services that we provide. We've got our Facebook, which I don't think I've told you about before. It's something that we do put a lot of information on. We like to use stats and case studies as well, so you can liken that. That's you can find that at facebook.com/Euroconsumer. And we also have Twitter. Again, just we put lots of different things out upon that, and that's at UK ECC. But as always, if you are unsure, you can always pick up the phone, and we're more happy to discuss anything, over the phone in real time, which some people often want to do when they get to that point of having a dispute. You don't want to be waiting around for a response for email. You just want to know what you're entitled to and how to go about it. And you can get us on 01268 88 6690.
Okay, Adam, thanks for your time.
Great, thank you.
The website details, Facebook and Twitter, along with a telephone number for UK ECC, can be found at facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show. Just look for the post for the 22nd December 2016 show. You can follow me on Twitter at holiday_hut. Thomas Cook has come up with a new animal welfare policy for attractions that it sells. This follows on from TripAdvisor, who did the same thing a couple of months ago, and other companies, including Thomas Cook, back in January-February time this year, banned elephant rides. The policy is worked with the Born Free Foundation, and soon we'll be hearing from Daniel Turner, who's the Associate Director of Tourism and EU Compliance, as he explains what Born Free is all about and how they're working with the travel industry. But the policy that Thomas Cook has come out with is based on the policy that ABTA released a year or so ago. So where better place to start than to explain what ABTA's policy is and why they're doing it. And we're going to hear all that information from Sean Tipton, who's a spokesperson for ABTA, the Travel Association.
Well, we set up the animal welfare guidelines partly in response to a need from our members. They were saying that they were getting increasing calls from members of the public saying, if you're selling animal attractions in particular, do you do any checks on them? Do you have any guidelines in place? And the answer, unfortunately, was no to that. So we set out in conjunction with the Born Free Foundation to address that need, and it, went into a lot of detail. Took a few years to get the guidelines drafted, and they have proved pretty popular with members. And recently, our second biggest company, Thomas Cook, said that they would be auditing all of the attractions they use in line with the guidelines. And if any of them don't come up to scratch, they'll be given a period of time to improve the way they treat the animals that they're holding. But if they don't do that, then they'll simply stop selling them. So they're voluntary, the guidelines, because it's we're talking about a lot of work here, and but they are proving pretty popular. And also the other side of it, the animal welfare community is very vocal in its views, and we've had very little critical responses from that about the guidelines themselves. So I think a pretty good job is being done by the destinations team who drafted them with the help of Born Free.
So what sort of animals and attractions are covered?
Well, you're talking about a whole range of things, really. I suppose the main ones that, if you're talking about going on holiday, would be something like dolphins in captivity, or even in the wild for that matter. So SeaWorld, for example, in America. In Thailand, we have an issue there with the way that some elephants are being treated. And also, I don't know if you're aware, John, there was quite a scandalous situation in Thailand with a tiger sanctuary, which was allegedly run by some Buddhist monks. And it turned out that this was totally bogus. They were breeding the tigers for body parts, drugging them heavily, sedating them because, and people were told, no, they're perfectly happy. It's just we brought them up since they were very young and they're very comfortable around human beings. They're tigers. It was very, very misleading. And that's part of the problems with some of these attractions that we're dealing with. People do, they want to interact with animals, understandably, and they're actually animal lovers in many cases. That's why they want to do so. But they are being, in some cases, very seriously misled. So it's a whole range of things. It's not just animal attractions. It's also issues that if you're interacting with animals in the wild, the kind of ways you should behave. And also, if you're, let's say, in a resort and somebody comes up with a nice cuddly monkey and says, would you like to have your picture taken with it? It might look like cute and pretty, but actually these animals, once more, are generally heavily sedated. And once they grow up and stop being quite so cute, they're often killed. It's a pretty harsh world we live in, but people often are not aware of these kind of things as well. So part of the guidance is also so our members are aware of these kind of issues, and they can educate their customers as well about the truth that lies behind a lot of these activities.
If one of your members uses your guidelines and goes to an attraction, and the attraction turns around and says, well, we're following local laws, is the case you just have to walk away from them and not sell tickets, or what?
Yeah, I can understand people saying that, John, but that's part of the issue. Local laws in relation to animal welfare in many countries are either non-existent or very low. So that isn't really good enough. And that's one of the things about the travel industry. I mean, slightly different subjects. Remember years going to Spain, the advice was don't drink the water. And that was very simply because the water was often not safe to drink. Now, one of the things the travel industry did was they worked very closely, particularly local hotels and local authorities, saying, look, you really need to improve standards here because our customers are falling ill. So, and that had an immense benefit for local people as well. So, and I'm not saying it was purely down to the travel industry, but I know a lot of pressure was put on to improve standards. And lo and behold, it's good for customers, but it was very good for the local people. So I think the same applies to animal welfare as well, that if people's attitudes change towards the way they treat animals, actually it's very beneficial for them because it will actually attract, the animals will prosper and they'll attract more tourists. I saw a statistic recently in Indonesia. They started to protect the manta rays that swim around the seas around Indonesia, because they've actually did a survey and said that every live manta ray was worth $1 million in terms of tourist revenue. And how much was a dead one worth? About $300 or $400 just for its meat. So they've actually, a light went off saying, oh, right, it's actually, we need to look after these creatures. It's in our economic interest to do so. So that's part of it as well. And one of the issues we have is in terms of animals being kept in captivity. It's quite a controversial area, this. But preferably, if you're going to interact with animals, it's better if you can do it when they're in the wild, which obviously, once more, gives an incentive to local people to preserve animals in their natural habitat. And that's so it's all round good news for everybody.
You can keep up to date with travel news and leave me a message at facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show. So we know why ABTA came up with their policy on animals and attractions. It's for the welfare of the animals, to deal with the concerns of customers, and there is an added benefit that there'll be increased profits for people as well. But an animal policy by a travel organisation or a travel company isn't worth much unless some animal experts get involved as well. And Sean from ABTA already said that Born Free Foundation were involved with their policy. And Born Free are also speaking with Thomas Cook about their new way of dealing with animal attractions in the new year. But who are the Born Free Foundation and what do they do? I spoke to Daniel Turner, who's Associate Director of Tourism and EU Compliance at the Born Free Foundation. We talked about Thomas Cook and other travel companies and attractions. But the first thing we talked about was finding out a bit more about the Born Free Foundation and who they are and what they do.
The Born Free Foundation is an international wildlife charity or organisation. Our focus is twofold on ensuring individual animals are kept in appropriate conditions in captivity, with a vision that captivity of wild animals should be phased out, but in the short term to improve conditions and legislation. And then the other side of things focuses on conservation of species in the wild.
When did you start?
The organisation started in 1984, and I started in 2000, so I've been here a while.
You have, yeah, that's a long time. How did the Born Free Foundation become involved with Thomas Cook?
Well, when I started in 2000, we were particularly focused on challenging the travel industry to change their practices in relation to how animals are involved within the tourism experiences and what kind of attractions they promoted. And that kind of more a negative, aggressive approach did not work at all, in the sense that the operator tended to sort of put their heads in the sand and ignore all our advances, and we just were not getting anywhere at all. And obviously our goal is to try and alleviate animal suffering and neglect wherever possible. So we needed to find another strategy that could move things forward and start addressing the problems that we were hearing about from travellers around the world. So we started to engage in a positive manner, in a constructive manner, directly with the travel industry through ABTA, which is the British Travel Association, and individual operators. And we found that that approach was much more successful on relaying information and evidence to back up our claims. We found that tour operators were making the right decisions from that information and changing their practices, establishing animal welfare policy, ensuring animals were on their kind of agenda as far as best practice. And Thomas Cook has been one of those tour operators who have taken this issue seriously. And whilst they're a business and a profit-making business, they have sought to review their practices to make sure that they at least tackle the major, the problem issues, those kind of activities that seriously compromise the welfare of animals. And obviously, we welcome that approach. I mean, this is a step-by-step process, and we're intent on them increasing their focus, and hopefully we will see some change.
Checking it out before you check in on the John Guinn Travel Show on ukhealthradio.com. Still to come on the show, travel news with not one, not two, but 3 Airbnb stories. As you know, I've been covering Airbnb, seems like every week forever, but there's 3 more stories attached to them, and they'll be coming on at the end of the show. The main purpose of the show this week is to talk about animal welfare in tourism, and I'm speaking to Daniel Turner, the Associate Director of Tourism and EU Compliance at the Born Free Foundation. Animal attractions and animals can be a wide scope or it can be a narrow scope. It just depends on how the companies or the organisations define it themselves. So it can get a little bit confusing if you hear something about animal protection. Well, no, it's just a few animals or it's just some attractions. So I wanted to know what was involved in the product before Born Free noticed it and looked into taking action.
Well, I mean, definitely it's what people relay to us. So travellers who are, well, whether they're just going to their local zoo or whether they're travelling abroad and visiting a zoo, a dolphin area, riding an elephant, or going to see animals in the wild, we hear back from those travellers when they're unhappy about what they've seen, if animals are obviously being exploited or abused or neglected in a horrible cage or enclosure, then we tend to hear back from those travellers, and each of those reports we take very seriously. We investigate further, and then we work with various entities to try and get change. So the traveller is one way we can hear about this information, but also obviously the media reports issues, and ourselves as far as our own travels and our own goals, in particular to the captivity of wild animals.
So a cynic could say that all this activity by TripAdvisor, Thomas Cook, ABTA and all the other travel